What has all of this got to do with politics? Well, one simple question to start with. How could such a man be released onto the streets of Britain after serving only 8 years? My final guest this morning is the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. How could it happen, Boris Johnson?
Well, I'm afraid that when you look at the case, there are a number of conclusions that one can immediately draw, and that is, of course, first of all, Andrew, that I pay tribute to the emergency services, the reaction of the police, the public. Our sympathies, of course, are with the victims and their families. But although it is very early, I think it is legitimate to look at the case in the way that you just have and to ask ourselves exactly that question. How could he be out so early? The answer is, I'm afraid, that he was out because he was on automatic early release. When the judges reviewed his sentence in 2012, they had no option but to comply with the law that Labour brought in 2008, which meant effectively...
You say Labour, you've been in power for
effectively
a decade.
That he was out, they had to comply with the law as it stood, and he was out in 8 years. And this was a guy, don't forget, that Judge Wilkie said was a very serious jihadi. And that's why when I've been in office for 120 days.
Your party's been in power for 10 years.
That's why when I stood on the steps of Downing Street, I said we were putting more money into policing. But I also said in August that we would no longer allow the automatic early release of serious and violent offenders. And what we're doing now is there is a bill which was in the Queen's speech to prevent automatic early release. And as you know...
There is nothing in your manifesto that would have changed this case, is there? Nothing in your manifesto.
There's a bill in the Queen's speech to prevent automatic early release, which I have campaigned against. Yeah. And it was because, to get to your question, Andrew, it was because of automatic early release that this individual was out on the streets.
And that came about because...
And had it not been...
His original sentence was an indeterminate sentence to protect IPP, to direct the public. That was abolished by the Conservatives under your colleague Ken Clarke when he was Justice Secretary. Was that a mistake?
No, what we were doing...
Why not?
Because he was sentenced under Labour's system that allowed him to be released automatically,
he was sentenced under IPP.
Having served only 8 years. And when the judges, Judge Leveson and others, reviewed his case in 2012, they determined that he could come out effectively after only 8 years.
Your government got rid of the IPPs in 2012. You got rid of the IPPs in 2012, and here is what the Ministry of Justice said about that. He said there was going to be new determinate sentences. This will see more dangerous criminals given life sentences and others spending longer periods in prison with tough conditions on release.
Absolutely.
It did not happen.
What we have said, and what I have said since coming to office in the last 3 or 4 months, is that I think this whole system of automatic early release, which was brought in by Labour, and it was under that system.
You've been in power for 10 years.
It was under that. Sorry, I've only been in office for 120 days.
So,
and by the way,
you're leader of the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party has been in power for 10 years.
One of the reasons we're having this election is because we have a Queen's speech that was blocked by Parliament, amongst other things, not least Brexit. We need to get it done so that we can move forward. I think it's ridiculous, I think it's repulsive that individuals as dangerous as this man should be allowed out after serving only 8 years. And that's why we are going to change the law.
We were told that he was under strict conditions when he was let out. What strict conditions were they?
Well, there are a number of conditions attached to his licence, and I'm not going to go into all the details, but he had very strict conditions. I do. I've seen them. But let's be frank, they were nothing that was capable of being done could have changed the way he behaved.
Licence conditions on release.
Could have changed the way he behaved. The problem was that this individual should have been in prison. And there was no question
of probation. Under the Conservatives, he was let out. Under the Conservatives, he was let out. This was the Conservative decision.
Because of changes
You've been in power for 10 years.
Because of changes to the law that were brought in by the Labour Party that I voted against.
You're in power for 10 years and you've done nothing about it in 10 years.
That Jeremy Corbyn voted in favour of.
For 10 years, you've done nothing about it.
He voted in favour of automatic early release.
For 10 years, you've done nothing about it.
You cannot retrospectively change the basis on which someone... Sorry, that you cannot change the basis on which someone is sentenced. You're talking about Usman Khan. I'm talking now
for
about
10
the
years,
future.
You've done nothing to change the system or toughen it.
I'm
now
talking
you're saying,
about what
now
we are going to do. I've been in office for 120 days. We're going to bring in tougher sentences for serious sexual and violent offenders and for terrorists. We put more money into counter-terrorism.
Well, let's talk about your record.
That is what we're going to do.
The Chief Inspector
absolutely deplore the fact that this man was out on the streets. I think it's absolutely repulsive, and we are going to take
that
action
repulsive thing
against it.
happened under the Conservatives. It was Conservative legislation and a Conservative regime under which. Would you like to apologise to people for the fact that that happened?
I must respectfully repeat to you that his release was necessary under the law because of the automatic early release scheme under which he was sentenced. That was the reality. And that was brought in by Labour with the support of Jeremy Corbyn and the rest of the Labour Party.
Earlier this year,
I opposed it both in 2003. I opposed it both in 2003 and in 2008. And now that I am Prime Minister, I'm going to take steps to make sure that people are not released early when they have
I do need to ask you some questions.
Sexual,
That's the way,
violent or terrorist
That's the way it
offences.
goes.